hold out your hand, and let a little sand run through your fingers. It seems the most ordinary thing in the world, this pale, dry, whispering stuff, poured out beneath our feet at every beach and desert edge. We walk on it, build castles of it, brush it from our skin without a second thought. And yet each single grain resting in your palm is older than any mountain you have ever seen, and has traveled farther, over a longer span of time, than almost anything else you could ever hold. Let us slow down, and follow just one grain, on the long, patient journey that made it. Our grain begins its life not on a beach, but high on the shoulder of a mountain, locked deep inside a mass of hard gray rock. Perhaps it is granite, the coarse speckled stone that forms in the roots of mountains, cooled slowly from molten rock far underground. Within that granite are countless tiny crystals, grown and fused together over a span of time we can hardly imagine. And among them, glassy and clear and endlessly patient, are the crystals of quartz. Our grain is one of them. Quartz is a simple thing, only silicon and oxygen, the two most common elements in all the Earth's crust, bound together into one of the hardest, most enduring minerals in the natural world. That endurance is the whole secret of its story. When the mountain begins to wear away, as every mountain must, the softer minerals crumble and dissolve and are washed to nothing. But the quartz endures. It survives. It is the last stubborn remnant of the mountain, the part that will not surrender. And the wearing away has already begun. Slowly, so slowly, water seeps into the tiniest cracks of the granite. In the cold of night it freezes, and swells, and pushes the cracks a little wider. In the heat of day it thaws and drains away. Season after season, century after century, the ice works its patient wedge. Rain, faintly acidic, eats at the softer crystals. Roots of small tough plants prise into the seams. And at last, one day that no one witnesses, our grain of quartz comes loose from the rock that held it, and tumbles free onto the mountainside, a single bright fleck among the rubble of a slow collapse. Now the journey begins in earnest, and its road is water. The grain is caught by a trickle of snowmelt, then by a stream, then by a river. And here it enters a world of ceaseless motion. Rivers are among the great sculptors of the earth, and they carry their tools with them, the loose stones and grains torn from the highlands, using them to grind and carve the land as they flow. Our grain becomes one of those tools. It rolls and bounces along the riverbed, knocking against boulders, tumbling over falls, resting in still pools for years before a flood lifts it and sends it onward again. With every collision, the grain is shaped. It began as a sharp, angular splinter, freshly broken from the rock, with edges that could cut. But the river is a slow and thorough polisher. Grain against grain, stone against stone, the sharp corners are knocked away and worn smooth. Over the long journey downstream, a jagged fragment becomes a rounded, frosted bead. If you could read the shape of a single grain of sand under a lens, you could read something of the distance it has come. The sharp grains are young travelers. The smooth, rounded ones are old, and have journeyed far. How long does the passage down a river take? Not a season. Not a lifetime. A single grain may spend tens of thousands of years working its way from the mountains to the sea, buried and unburied, halted and released, again and again. Rivers do not carry their sand in a smooth flow but in fits and starts, storing it in bars and banks for ages before a great flood stirs it loose once more. Our grain is in no hurry. It has all the time in the world. And at last, after that immense unhurried passage, the river slows, and widens, and meets the sea. Here, where the fresh water loses its strength and spreads out into the salt, it drops the last of its burden. The sand it has carried settles out and gathers, and our grain comes to rest, for a while, upon the shore. Now consider the beach itself, and the strange truth of it. A beach looks like a fixed and solid place, but it is nothing of the kind. A beach is a river of sand, flowing slowly sideways along the coast, driven by the endless slanting arrival of the waves. Each wave rushes up the sand at an angle, carrying grains with it, and then draws straight back down under gravity. Up at a slant, back straight down. Up at a slant, back straight down. And with each cycle, every grain is nudged a little way along the shore. This slow sideways march is called longshore drift, and it means that the sand beneath your feet at the beach is not staying still at all. It is on the move, grain by grain, traveling along the coast, only far too slowly for the eye to follow. The waves do more than move the grain. They sort it, endlessly, with astonishing care. The lighter, finer grains are carried away and dropped where the water is calmer. The heavier grains are left behind. And so the beach is graded and combed and arranged, each grain finding the place that suits its size and weight, in a sorting so patient and so thorough that no human hand could ever match it. And here it is worth pausing to notice that not all sand is the same, and not all of it began in granite. On the shores of certain tropical islands, the sand is not the crushed remains of mountains at all. It is the crushed remains of life. It is coral and seashell, and the skeletons of tiny sea creatures, ground fine by the waves, and by the patient work of fish that scrape the reef and pass the coral through their bodies as pale grains of sand. A single large parrotfish may make hundreds of kilograms of white sand in a year. Some of the most beautiful beaches in the world are, quite literally, made this way, grain by grain, from the living reef. And on rarer shores still, there is star sand, sand made of the tiny shells of single-celled creatures that grew their bodies into the shape of little stars. Pour a handful under a lens and you will find a galaxy in your palm, a scatter of 5-pointed and 6-pointed stars, each once the home of a living thing no larger than a speck. There are beaches where the sand itself remembers, in its shape, the shape of life. And the color of a beach tells its own quiet story. Where the sand came from dark volcanic rock, worn from the flanks of young fiery islands, the shore is black, so black it can grow almost too hot to walk upon under a strong sun, a beach the color of ash and midnight. Where old iron minerals have stained the grains, the sand runs red in gold and rust. On some rare shores a green mineral, born deep in the fire of the earth, is worn out and gathered by the waves into strange olive-green sands. And on the calm coral coasts, the sand is white, so white it seems to hold the light, because it is made of the pale broken skeletons of the reef. Read the color of a beach, and you begin to read the rock and the fire and the life that made it. But let us return to our own grain of quartz, resting now on its restless beach, and let us think, for a moment, about how very many of its companions there are. Take up a single handful of dry beach sand, and you hold within it more grains than there are stars you could ever count with your unaided eye on the clearest night. Look along the whole curve of the beach, and then imagine every beach on every coast of every sea, and then the deserts beyond, and the buried sandstones below, and the mind simply lets go of the number, as it must. There are more grains of sand upon the earth than we have any true way to grasp, and every single one of them has a history as long as the one we are following now. Every grain is a traveler. Every grain has a tale. And yet, for all their number, the grains are not there forever. The sea is always taking as well as giving. A beach that stands calm and golden through the gentle months can be torn away in a single winter storm, its sand dragged out into deeper water, only to be slowly, patiently returned, grain by grain, when the calm comes back. A beach is a truce between the land and the sea, forever being broken and forever being remade, and the sand is the currency in which that long bargain is paid. Now let us follow our grain inland, for the wind has plans for it too. Where the coast is dry and the wind is strong, the sand does not always stay by the water. It is lifted, grain by grain, and blown inland, and there it gathers into dunes. A dune is one of the most beautiful shapes in all of nature, a long smooth curve rising to a crest and falling away on the far side, sculpted entirely by the wind. And a dune, like a beach, is alive with slow motion. The wind rolls grains up the gentle windward slope, and at the crest they spill over and slide down the steep sheltered face beyond. Grain by grain, the whole great dune creeps forward, downwind, across the desert, a wave of sand moving so slowly that we call it still. In the deserts of the world there are dunes taller than the tallest towers, ridges of sand hundreds of meters high, marching in slow procession across the land. And among them are dunes that sing. On certain rare dunes, when the dry sand on the steep face begins to slide, it makes a sound, a deep, low, humming drone that can carry for a great distance, so loud and so strange that ancient travelers thought it was the voice of spirits in the desert. We understand it a little better now. When the grains are of just the right size, and just the right dryness, and they slip past one another in a great sliding sheet, they move in time together, and their tiny movements combine into a single deep note that rolls out across the dunes. It is the sand itself, singing, a sound made by nothing but grain sliding upon grain, an old and eerie music of the dry places of the world. There is more than one shape a dune can take, and each is a message written by the wind. Where the wind blows steadily from a single quarter and the sand is not too deep, the dunes curve into long graceful crescents, horns pointing downwind, marching across the desert floor like a fleet of slow pale ships. Where the winds come from many directions, turning with the seasons, the sand piles up into great star-shaped mounds with arms reaching out on every side, dunes that do not travel at all but grow slowly taller in one place over thousands of years, until they stand among the tallest hills of sand on earth. And where the wind and the sand are in their simplest balance, the dunes ripple out in long straight ridges, one behind another, ruled across the desert like the lines of some vast and patient page. To learn to read the dunes is to learn to see the wind, made solid and held still. And upon the surface of the dunes, the wind writes finer patterns still. Run your eye across the sand and you will see it everywhere combed into small even ripples, crest and trough, spaced with a regularity that seems almost deliberate. No hand made them. They form on their own, wherever wind moves sand, from the smallest garden sandpit to the greatest desert on earth, and even, we now know, upon the cold red deserts of other worlds. The same simple law that ripples the sand at your feet ripples it across the face of distant planets. It is one of the quiet unities of nature, this patterning, a rhythm the wind falls into wherever it meets the loose dry grains. And now, at last, the grain's long journey turns toward its deepest transformation, and its longest rest. Over ages, the dunes are buried. New sand piles on top, and then mud, and then more sand still, and the weight of all that lies above begins to press down upon the grains beneath. Water trickles slowly through them, carrying dissolved minerals, and those minerals settle in the spaces between the grains, and slowly, over millions upon millions of years, they cement the loose sand together into solid stone. Our grain, once free to roll and blow and drift, is now locked once more inside rock, this time the rock we call sandstone. And here is the quiet symmetry at the heart of the whole story. Our grain began its life locked inside the granite of a mountain. It broke free, and traveled down rivers, and along beaches, and up into singing dunes, over a span of time longer than the whole history of our kind. And now it has been gathered up and pressed back into stone once more. The wanderer has become a mountain again. Sandstone cliffs, banded in red and gold, standing tall in the desert light, are made of nothing but old sand, old grains, each one a traveler, each one with a journey behind it as long as this. But no rest is forever, not for sand. In time, the sandstone too will be lifted up, by the slow shrug of the moving crust, into new highlands. And there the rain and the ice and the roots will find it once more, and begin, once more, to wear it away. And our grain, freed a second time, will tumble loose and begin its long journey down to the sea all over again. This is the great slow wheel that sand has been turning for billions of years. Mountain to river, river to beach, beach to dune, dune to stone, and stone to mountain once more, around and around, on a rhythm so vast that a single human life is far too short to see even the smallest part of it move. And when at last the grain is locked once more within the stone, its story does not fall silent, for the sandstone remembers. Look closely at a cliff of banded sandstone, standing tall and gold in the desert light, and you will see it is not smooth but crossed with long sweeping lines that curve down within each layer, one set laid at an angle across the next. These are the frozen faces of ancient dunes, the very slopes down which the old sand once slid, preserved in stone for tens of millions of years. To read them is to read a desert that vanished before the first flower ever bloomed, to know from which way the wind blew across a land that no living thing remembers. The grains hold the shape of a vanished wind. The stone keeps the memory of a sea, or a river, or a dune, long after everything else about that world is gone. And sometimes, pressed within that stone, we find more than the shape of the wind. A footprint, hardened where some ancient creature crossed the wet sand of a shore or a riverbank, held now in rock for an age. The ripples of a tide that went out 100 million years ago. The burrow of a small buried thing. The grains of sand are among the great keepers of the earth's memory, patient and faithful, gathering up the marks of each passing world and holding them safe down the long dark corridors of time, until some later I should come to read them. There is a lesson, if we care to take one, in the slow patience of the sand. Nothing about its journey is hurried. The mountain does not crumble in a day. The river does not carry its grains to the sea in a season. The dune does not cross the desert within a life. Each stage of the story unfolds across spans of time so long that they lie entirely beyond our feeling, and yet the whole vast will turns on, quietly, ceaselessly, whether or not there is anyone to watch it. The sand keeps a rhythm older than life itself, and to hold a little of it in the hand is to touch, for a moment, a patience deeper than the sea. So the next time you stand on a beach, and let the warm dry sand run through your fingers, hold that thought a moment longer. In your hand lie the ground down bones of ancient mountains, and the crushed shells of coral reefs, and perhaps a scatter of tiny stars. Each grain has journeyed for an age you cannot picture, and will journey on for ages more, long after your footprints on the shore have washed away with the evening tide. The sand does not hurry. The sand keeps its own vast and patient time. And there is a deep and simple peace in that, if we are quiet enough to feel it. Let the grains run slowly through your fingers, and let your thoughts run just as slowly, and rest.